listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. Today is Thursday, April 20th, year of our Lord 2017. You're listening to a Gen Pop Media production. It's funny that media is in our title because that's going to be the topic for today. But again, as always, I would like to urge everybody, do your own research. The whole point of this show is merely to stimulate civil debate, to get you to look into it and find your own answers. You don't have to come to the same conclusions we do.
Yes, you do. You do. You really do.
Well, we hope.
I'm just kidding.
We hope you.
I'm just kidding.
We hope that you will come to the same conclusions we do, but you do not have to. All we ask is that if something smells fishy, that you look into it. You check what's inside the newspaper, because it might not be fish. Because there are no more secrets. Only ignorance and people who do not know how to merge properly.
I did not have that problem. I was driving like a psych. I left late and got here early. Psychopath driving does have its place in time.
I could not psychopath drive because I was standing still.
You were cussing, though, right?
I was swearing profusely.
That's the only thing that keeps me sane.
Yeah. And what makes it better is when my window's down and the person I'm swearing at's window's down. Then I feel much better because at least 85% of the time I am bigger and scarier than the person I am swearing at.
Yeah, and there's a lesson in here because a lot of the perception people get when you're a Christian is that you start walking around with doilies around your neck and like you look like an Amish person and everything. Regular people can be Christians, and you can still swear and be a Christian. I'm not saying follow our lead on that one.
Right. Well, I actually read an excellent article that made me feel better about that topic exactly, because the whole thing about being a Christian is it is an ongoing process. It is an evolution. It's much like practicing medicine, because you never really get it right until the end. The closer we are to the date that we chose to transform our lives, the easier it is to slip into past behaviors, and swearing happens to be one of my leftover vices that I'm trying to break. So while I do feel bad about it and ask for forgiveness,
do you really feel honestly?
Yeah, no, I actually do.
Really?
I get a little upset with myself now when I go on a tirade, because I should know better than that. Thank God my son wasn't in the car, because I should be sending the last thing I want to do is raise a foul-mouthed trucker. It's bad enough I'm one.
Yeah, I was just on the phone with...
if your son was in the car, I'd be cool with it.
No, I just got done dropping like 6 F-bombs right in a row because I almost rear-ended a guy. So I started going... I'm not even going to say it on this show, but I was going F, 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 F. And Betsy's like, your son's in the car. And I'm like, oh, shit.
Oh, F.
Exactly. Then he started laughing. He's like, Daddy. Whatevs. We will live.
So we want to talk about, there's been some interesting stuff that has transpired over the last week, and it is related to one of our very favorite topics, which is the media, which is the mainstream media at large. We like to talk about soft disclosure, and there's been a whole huge issue with fake news and all that stuff. And I think Tony noticed he made me feel better about one of the topics I was on the fence about, because there's a smear job out there going on, and it's taken its second potential victim. But this all started with the whole smear job on Alex Jones, where I'm not going to say he's perfect. No one's perfect. Some of the topics he deals with, there's a high, he's dealing with very sensitive topics. They're hard to prove correct. Just as hard to prove incorrect, yet, the guy with the bullhorn usually wins with the masses. And it seems like there's a coordinated media attack on our friend Alex Jones.
Yeah, now when we talk about the word media is very broad. It's basically a medium is any form of communication.
Right.
So this could be books, magazines, newspapers, television shows, movies. But we're going to be, I think, talking about news media. If I'm not
We are, and
mistaken.
usually when I talk
Mainstream
about
news.
when I talk about mainstream media, that is me probably being a little ambiguous about the topic. I'm talking about the mainstream news shows.
Gotcha.
Because that's what I think of. I mean, you're right. Media encompasses everything: movies, television shows, comedies, drama, fiction, nonfiction. To me, media is the news.
At the end of the day, all media, and it doesn't matter if it's books, newspapers,
Right, it's
magazines, television, movies, all the media we get. Well, actually, I won't say all, but some guy broke it down. 90, and I'll show you. I'll put up a graphic when we put this on YouTube. 96% of all media in the United States is controlled by 6 individual human beings at the heads of 6 individual companies. And if you were to ask me, my opinion, they all praise Lucifer. Literally.
It is quite possible. You think they're dining on babies with Hillary?
By the time you're the head of a major media company, you're not there unless you've been vetted and you've gotten past all your degrees. You're probably more likely a bloodline generational person at that point.
Probably.
So
what do you know about Bezos?
Jeff Bezos
yeah,
from Amazon?
Amazon. Well, and Washington Post. He owns Washington Post.
Oh, didn't he just buy that recently? Or
yeah, I think within the last few years, I think I have to look it up. But he received $600 million from the CIA last year.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Well,
it's the same way
they award that to people for telling the truth, right? That's just that's like an award for doing a good job.
Well, the CIA
right?
through its front companies, you'd be very surprised. They own pieces of more media businesses, and I've got a lot of quotes I'm going to talk to you about that talk about how the CIA literally controls our media here. But they're invested, and anyone that has owned a business, and we all have here at this table, you're investors at the end of who does the CEO answer to? Because everyone answers to someone.
Right.
They answer to either the debt or the equity in the business. So
Right.
it could be your stockholders, or it could be the bank or persons that you owe the money to. That is the tail that does wag the whole dog. And you guys understand that when there's cash flow issues or whatever, CEOs are the ones scrambling around to make sure that everything's working.
Well, I would argue it goes way deeper than just cash flow, because what Howard's alluding to, there was the news story about Alex Jones. Okay, first of all, I put this on Facebook because I had this thing pop up. This is here's how to spot fake news.
Yeah,
Facebook,
that's been at the top of my feed for a
Facebook
while.
pops. I'm like, well, thank you, Facebook, for pointing out how to spot fake news. So delete, right? But then I get the Alex Jones thing, and so I click on it, and we've discussed Alex Jones before.
Mm-hmm.
He's a wild man, okay. But I click on that, and there's immediately pages and pages of stories. Okay, this is breaking news. Alex Jones, and what was it, Howard? He was claiming that he plays a part.
He's a character. It's made up.
His lawyer
Yeah.
claimed that he's.
Okay, so that's
his argument.
that's what we're framing is
Yeah.
that he's in a child custody
Right.
dispute. With
Well,
his,
they're not talking about that. They're just talking about
Well,
the
that's what
fact
it is.
that his lawyer came out and said that it's a character. And if you dig deeper, what's going on is he is embroiled in a bitter custody suit.
Battle. Yeah.
And what's going on is his wife is like, well, just listen to one of his shows. He's insane. Our kids can't be around him.
Ooh, his wife pulled that.
Oh, his wife pulled that card.
Because there's no
And
way
so his
they're married
lawyer-
and not really a part of.
Right. So his lawyer pulled the card. Well, that's just a character he plays. He's just playing it up to get ratings,
Which he does.
Which I'm sure he does. But the lawyer's doing his job and lying his butt off to save his client's bacon.
right.
But they're taking and turning that, and the ironic thing is that Tony and I both noticed as we were trying to explain this to a few friends who didn't quite get it. All of the stories broke at exactly the same time.
Right.
There's nothing, and then 2 minutes later, there's 20 stories.
Oh, there was plenty of stories. I mean, every news site I was going to, every one, and they're all different stories. It's not like they put here's a story from AP or and then they just post it. It was all individual stories,
individually written.
About,
Now they were all citing AP, who broke the story in the Washington Post, I believe, and they were all quoting AP, but these were not just AP blurbs. These were all written opinion pieces on Alex Jones, citing AP as the source, and all of these stories came out at the same time. When you looked up Google, it was like, it was like 2 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 2 hours ago, 2 hours ago.
And here's why the comment about who you answer to, because they're answering to somebody specific because they put writers on it in advance.
Yeah, in advance.
So somebody in that news
all
source
different names
had to say, okay, hey, so-and-so writer, come here. This is your piece. I need this by noon.
Well, that's one of the things for me when I was looking into 9/11, when I realized that the media was in on it. Now, that's such a broad statement. It can actually let me clarify that a little bit. Do I think the person on television reading the news, the press release, is in on it? Not necessarily, and probably not. But when I was researching 9/11, there was one report. It was made famous by Jane Stanley of the BBC because she reported the collapse of Building 7 20 minutes before it happened. And that was I don't remember the news service. I don't know if it was Murdoch's or if it was AP or UPI, which was in business back then. But what I noticed is she wasn't the only one that did that. Several is an understatement. Dozens of news services came out saying that Building 7 had collapsed before it happened, and they came from different news wires. So if you want to understand something about newspapers, because they're always looking for content, there are these agencies that supposedly are ambivalent and neutral. And we'll take the AP as an example, and the AP stands for the Associated Press. And what they do is they write essentially general stories, and they put them out there for sale so that any individual news medium like a Washington Post or a Frontline or a Nightline, they can pick it up and do something with it without having to use their own reporters and their own people, because they sometimes don't have – there's just too many things going on in the world to just have it,
No, I mean, I remember being a kid and when there was breaking news, Crazy Bill on Channel 7. What's his last name?
Bonds?
Bill Bonds. He'd be like, and AP, we have breaking news. The Associated Press reports that, and then he'd fill in the blanks with it and comment on it. So like you said, they're supposed to be neutral. It's basically just, these are the facts as we know them. It has been reported that, and they kind of let you know what's going on in the world, and they send it out they put it out there for news agencies to grab.
Yeah, I think the most important weapon that the enemy has is the media. I mean, if they control our thoughts, they control society.
Our opinions,
they control more so than you could ever realize. And things, even ideas that you think are yours and you came up with on your own, they were most likely suggested somewhere on purpose, somewhere along the way.
Well, how do you have a? I've caught myself doing this. I mean, how do you have an opinion on something you don't know anything about? But someone tells you something, so, hey, what do you think of blah, blah, blah? And you're like, well, I kind of have this feeling about it, blah, and it's like, it's because you picked something up somewhere else. You heard someone talking about it 2 weeks ago on the radio or wherever you get your news. You read a blurb in a newspaper, on a website. You saw something on Google. You saw something, a paid ad on Facebook. And, we're just as susceptible as anybody else. I'm more skeptical now. I dig into things, but, man, I am absolutely guilty of just, I heard.
Yeah. Well, that's how we're all conditioned. This is all conditioning, right?
Right.
There's a quote from a guy named Gerald Burton Winrod. This is 1935. Now, he wrote a book called Adam Weishaupt, A Human Devil. But he did say something interesting about propaganda, and I could point out many of these, anyone that studied it. And I think this might have been out of that book, Adam Weishaupt, A Human Devil. He wrote, propaganda is a powerful weapon in the hands of wicked men. Yet the thinking of a whole nation may become warped in a comparatively short time on some particular question. This totally applies to like what we're seeing here in Alex Jones. Yet this was written almost 100 years ago. Let's keep this in mind. Can become the whole of society can become warped in a comparatively short time on some particular question by a bombardment of ideas released from carefully planned and timed sources. By degrees, these ideas sink into the mass mind, and a community is molded accordingly. Then the people take the things that they have been taught for granted, little suspecting that, parrot-like, they are merely chattering about false notions which have been insinuated into their mental processes. And that is what our media does. And I think that's what I meant. Like, even opinions that you think you own and are like they were suggestions that have come to us.
Right.
Unless you really know how to think for yourself, because the vast majority of people are, Winrod called them parrot-like. I've always, sheeple seems to be the
Well, when you have, it just, like I said, now that my eyes are open, it blows me away how I will see a bunch of people who obviously don't know anything about what they're talking about, but they are all reciting the exact same sentences, word for word. And you can go to a bunch of different places. It can be you can be at a at a Starbucks in Canton. You can be at a library in Novi. It just and these people, you'll be in completely different groups who are not tuned into what's going on, and you will hear the same things over and over and over again. I had the same argument during the election when people were just repeating what they heard on CNN rather than doing their own research. What don't I like about Barack Obama? We can talk for 2 hours.
Well,
but what don't they like about that? What don't they like about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton
misogynist,
or
xenophobic?
Xenophobe. Yeah,
Thank you. That's a great
same thing.
And people that parrot those words, like, you may as well just have a sign on your forehead that says "I am brainwashed," because xenophobe, misogynistic. Those words really weren't in the regular American vernacular. Those might have been used in educational institutions and scholarly papers, but come on.
Even though
people write it on Facebook, you're like, oh yeah, I know where you're coming from.
Brainwashed.
Even though I may choose to use vulgar language as my primary source of communication at times, I actually have a pretty sizable vocabulary. I like the English language. I like words. They've always fascinated me. I like getting my point across. And I have a thesaurus, both on my computer and before the computers. I have a thesaurus in my room right next to my Bible and my the book that goes with it.
Standards.
The one that tells you about the Bible.
Right. Oh, my God. Strong's.
My concordance. Thank you. I've read the thesaurus a lot. Finding the right word is important to me. No clue what xenophobic meant. I had to look it up.
Yeah, I didn't. I still, frankly, I don't know. The only
It
time
means
I
that
ever
you're
heard
afraid
a
of
word,
people who aren't like you. That's basically what it means.
I never even heard. The closest I ever heard to that was in the movie Aliens 2, when they said that they were going to this LV-426 planet to fight a xenomorph. And I didn't know what that was. I still don't know exactly what it is.
Yeah, I don't think it was the same thing.
Game over, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, why don't you put her in charge? So
This little girl did that.
There's a segment in our upcoming film that totally hits on this point. And I don't remember what the saying was. But I'm gonna give you this isn't the exact example that's in there, but the wording on a particular story of a guy was that he had lost control of his mental faculties, okay? Now, there's a lot of ways to say that. The man's gone crazy. He's gone off the deep end. That, he's losing his cookie. A million ways to say it. Mainstream news comes out and says it. And within, all the morning local stations, and it didn't matter if it was ABC, NBC, or CBS. These are the guys that own pretty much local news in every city. Mm. They all came out with that exact same wording, all within an hour. Lost control of his faculty. Lost control of his faculty. Obviously, they are parroting something.
Yep.
So that's, if you understand, when you're at the top of that pyramid. Yeah.
Well, here's an interesting story about that. I was watching Tucker Carlson the other day, okay? And he's been coming up, so I'm keeping an eye on.
He got O'Reilly's spot, if anybody doesn't know.
Oh, is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually been doing pretty good. But he's, his shtick now is that he's bringing these people on and just railing them. Okay, so he brings on a Republican, okay, who is a CFR member. I was telling you guys about this last week.
Mm-hmm.
He brings this guy on who just starts going. He says, I'm a lifetime Republican. I voted for Romney. I voted for McCain. I'm a big supporter. Blah blah. And he's going on and on, but yet he's against Trump, and he's got something to do with the Russian ties. This whole Russian narrative with Trump. Which is just BS, right? This is the same kind of thing.
I would say so, because if they actually had something on him, I mean, with as bad as they want to get him, if they had something.
No, this is just propaganda. It's repeating the same
thing
over
and over. The whole
Cold
War was propaganda,
right.
and I can prove it. But anyway, go ahead.
But so Carlson starts laughing. The guy starts repeating all these different things about having a investigation and blah blah, and he's saying, parroting what everybody else says, and Carlson says. He starts laughing. He says, "What do you guys have, a morning call?"
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
What do you guys have, a
Tucker
morning call?
Carlson said that, or they said that about Tucker?
No, Tucker Carlson
said it.
What do you guys all get together, have a morning call, and
talking
discuss what
points.
the talking points are?
Yep.
No, that's what you do, Tucker.
Yeah, he's actually. I think he's turned around.
He is way different than he was a few years ago.
Yeah, I think there's times when you have somebody that reads the teleprompter. They come in, they do the reading, and they're kind of like the Mark Krim type reporter, right? And then you have, and I think Carlson's starting to wake up. Okay, he's actually talking about things like the Federal Reserve and this Russian narrative and all these other kind of things, and he's really getting pissed off about it, which is kind of fun to watch. So you never really know. This gets back to Alex Jones, because you really don't know, is Alex Jones a good guy or a bad guy? Could he be a misinformation guy? Of course he could, right? He could be CIA-based and leading everybody down the wrong path, but I just have to ask, if you watch him at all, what do you disagree with? You know what I mean? So if the guy is a misinformation, and you've said it before, he might go along 99% of the way to the last moment where he turns you the wrong direction.
Now, what you guys had that text thread going on this week about Alex Jones, and I didn't chime in because my thoughts about Alex Jones and what's happening are absolutely irrelevant. Because really what we're talking about is what's in his heart. Is he of God, or is he of the dark side? And for the same reason, like, I trust all of our hearts to a certain extent, but we've also on air said we don't even trust ourselves because we might pass inadvertently information that's not true, and we have done that. That's why we always say never trust one person. I mean, this is something that...
Well, and I don't believe we have ever stated something as a matter of fact when we weren't sure. We always tell them.
For instance, I once thought John F. Kennedy said with certainty there is a plot in America to enslave every man, woman, and child. Now, do I believe he still said it? Yes, but I couldn't find the citation for it, and I spoke of it as if it existed. It was an honest mistake, nothing on purpose. Quick sidebar, I do believe he said that. I just don't think it was ever recorded, because everything else he did and said backed that up. And there really is a plot in America to enslave every man, woman, and child. But that's irrelevant. What were we just talking about?
Jones.
The
thread.
The thread. So there was something that happened on Alex Jones about, I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago. And this caused a little war between Alex Jones, Ted Gunderson, a guy named Stu Webb, and a few other people. Where
Bill
Alex
Cooper?
What?
What about Bill Cooper?
Yeah, Bill Cooper.
Bill
was
Cooper,
after
right.
him.
And at the time, Alex Jones was broadcasting as if there had been the beginning of a communist attack on the country.
In Alaska.
Yes. Now, was Alex Jones doing a test run on how his audience would, maybe? Was he being fed false information by a source that he trusted himself that was trying to set him up to fail? Maybe. It's hard to... We will never know what's in a man's heart. But I will say this, and Tony, I think this is what you were talking about. At the end of the day, do you think the existence of Alex Jones has brought more people to the truth of God or has kept them from it?
That's tough.
No, I don't even think it's close.
That's tough, man, because you got to understand, Alex Jones is much like Donald Trump in the way that because of Jones' personality and how upset he tends to get and how over the top he tends to get, that is offensive to people. And so what happens is the message gets lost in his theatrics. This is a problem. This is a problem with Donald Trump.
But wait, what are his theatrics? And are you right now playing the part of having gotten an opinion of him? Because he just reports news. Now, he's upsetting because what he reports is not easy to hear. You know,
dude, he went off. There was one thing where and maybe this is the only thing, but in my Alex Jones viewing, there was a thing where he got upset at some senator and was telling the guy to arm himself because he was coming to kick his butt. It was over the top and unnecessary. I mean, he can disagree with the guy, but he was like, I mean, I'm talking a 7 or 8 minute rant. Sorry, man. Be passionate about something, but don't threaten somebody on the air. I'm sorry, that's wrong.
He does go a little overboard.
Threaten them privately.
He gets
always threaten in private. Make sure no one's taping.
Kind of like Goodfellas. He got a little out of order sometimes, But the thing is, I would have to say, I think he's brought more people to the truth than...
He certainly helped me. Now, is it possible, because the layers of deception get a lot thicker right near, right near the light. And that is where most of Satan's efforts are put.
Right.
There's a lot of people that are damn close to... I know people that they believe in everything from... They understand that cloning's going on. They understand that this whole system's rigged. They know there's something in the sky, but they just don't think they're demons. I mean, they're right at the edge, but they're not going to pass. So they're being set up for a deception. Now, it's very possible that that's what Alex Jones' role is. But if you are couched in the Bible, and that's why we always say to read that, that is a source that has never, ever, ever, ever been wrong. You can trust every word in it. And until someone says something on purpose that disagrees with it, they've got pretty much, and I'm going to say that word, pretty much, my trust. There's no one. Even if Jesus materialized here in this room, or someone claiming to be Jesus, and said something that disagreed with the book that's in my hand, I would believe the book over some apparition.
Well, that's what you're supposed to do.
You're going to question it. Yeah.
And I actually think that level of deception is heading.
You asked specifically how many do you think he has brought people to God? Now,
do I think does he bring
I think
more people to God,
he's,
or does he turn more people away from God?
I think because he is not, his mission is really just to expose what he and we happen to agree with him on much of it, but he is trying to expose the truth. He is trying to let people know what goes on behind the scenes and that the stories we're being sold are false. Now, maybe I haven't dug as deep into it as you have, but I don't think he's trying to bring anyone to Christ.
I think he does. I think he does.
I think he had.
Does he talk openly about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. And he talks about demons, the Luciferian presence in the world.
Okay, because I've seen specific things on it, but I didn't know that was part of his normal routine.
You just said it. He focuses on what he believes is the truth. And what was Jesus? He was the truth and the light.
And the way.
And so he is truth. And so if you're exposing truth, you're at the end of the day, you're exposing Jesus, maybe in
but there are still a
route,
vast majority of people who don't understand that they're connected. I mean, that's why we do the show.
But like if you were to just listen to Alex Jones and no one else, you would make your way to God. You would eventually.
I haven't listened enough to know, so I can't make an honest opinion.
Yeah, this is where I
tell you, like I said, I had a little. It was only a small amount, but it was sometimes because of his over the top, what I'm going to call theatrics. I was wondering, is this just actors? Does he really believe this? I was wondering this long before these articles came out, but now that they're smearing him, it makes me feel way better about him, because if he's that dangerous to them, he must be telling the truth.
Yeah, there's something.
If they're going to go out of their way like that, he must be telling the truth.
Most likely. But again, not just him, but anyone, I never take anything anyone says as gospel until I can go verify it from 3, 4, 5 other sources. But I think I'm with Tony, which is he's pretty much been pretty spot on.
I really haven't seen him wrong about anything, to be honest with you. But again, I mean, like you said, we're talking about the guy's heart. We have no way of knowing that. So knowing what his agenda, what his motivation is.
But we don't need
is his
to know
his motivation the same now as it was when he first started?
And that's a good another thing. A lot of people change, maybe.
Well,
Tucker
I mean, Glenn
Carlson
Beck.
Really
I think Glenn Beck is the prime example of this. I think he
changed the other way.
I think they got to Glenn Beck.
No, I think he changed.
I think he's off. I mean, I think the guy was at one point right spot on.
He was getting really close,
and I think in the last few years, I think they got to him. He's totally backed off. It's like vanilla ice cream all the time.
Well, he's been bumping up against these dark powers. He'd come out one day saying these FEMA camps are real, and then the next day he came out and said it was almost embarrassing. He's like, I know this is going to sound like someone got to me, but they didn't. But I was corrected. These FEMA camps aren't real. You can't come to that conclusion in 24 hours, the next day, because, frankly, they are real. Yeah. And all you have to do is simply go drive to a few of them, and you can see them. These things are manned and ready to go, and you can rely on reports from various other people that these things, they're there. There's no doubt about that. But you never, if you approach this where everything's got to jibe with what's in the Bible, it then doesn't matter if you're listening to someone from the dark side, because you can learn a lot from agents of darkness. And in doing this book, because obviously a lot of the quotes that are in this book are quotes from people that expose this organized evil enterprise. Mm-hmm. And they've been doing it, I've realized they've been doing it since Jesus Christ started doing it, and earlier. Even Aristotle and Plato did it as well, believe it or not. But certainly it's a lot easier to find stuff from 1700 on, because now we've got good recorded history. The Dark Ages are now over. And one thing I'm finding, I haven't run numbers on this yet, so it's just anecdotal at this point. I can't tell you the number of people that throughout history that have tried to expose the Illuminati, and it seems that one of a few things always happens to them. They die an unnatural early death. I mean, my quotes book is littered with people that have died unnatural early deaths, or they have been completely discredited, or they were put on trial or put in jail for something. In fact, the guy I just read, Gerald Butler Winrod, whatever. Winrod's his last name.
Winrod.
And this guy, you go look him up on Wikipedia.
Trading places.
Yeah.
All this guy ever said was that there is a. He said this in the 1930s, saying that the protocols of the learned elders of Zion is a Zionistic Jewish conspiracy, which it absolutely is. And what's the first thing you find? And that's all he really said. He's basically said there's a small group of guys claiming to be Jews that are controlling all the banks, and they're going to try and take over the world. And now I would say that too. But what did the when you go look him up on Wikipedia, what do you find? He's an anti-Semite.
Right.
Before you even read a paragraph, you're like, well, I can't listen. If you're not in tune to what's going on, you're like, I can't listen to this guy. This man was smeared, and then he was put on trial for sedition. Can anyone tell me who the hell's ever been on trial for sedition in the 20th century? Now, he ended up beating the trial, but that's a good example of you try and expose these guys and you get popular, or certainly if you did it earlier in the century, you were going to be something like this was going to be happening. You're literally butting up against evil, and evil doesn't want their secret out.
Well, yeah, that was back when they thought they had to keep it a secret.
Yeah, now it seems like the strategy has changed to total confusion in plain sight.
Well, that's because people don't believe it. All they have to do is put together a paragraph, have all the news stations recite it. People will learn the paragraph, and then they'll talk about it over dinner.
Well, it's like getting back to the Alex Jones thing, right? All these stories are coming out at the same time. It's propaganda to control somebody's mind, and people really have to realize. Because I agree with you. You start reading about these different people in the Illuminati. Like I was just looking up John Todd. Familiar with John Todd?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. What, thrown in prison, never heard from again.
All these stories are the same.
Self-confessed Christian, and then I believe he was accused and found guilty of raping a young... the very crimes that the evil side does, they accuse... And what I do think, like if you convert, like if you're an Illuminati defector, you probably have raped a child. Well, and they've got that on you. And they're going to make you look. They will do. It's one of the ways they keep their people in line. But yeah, he's a good example.
That's when you start seeing the playbook. When you figure out the playbook, that's part of the playbook. And just like you talk about this Bohemian Grove and all these people are under control somehow, and it can't just be money. At some point, you got to say, money's not worth it to do this, but if they've got these people under control, like all these movies that have come out about it, I just saw a movie, The Believers. Did you see that one with Martin?
That was
Sheen.
from the 80s.
Yeah,
Martin Sheen
from the
Santeria. Yeah, early. They're starting to make fun of the occult, like it's only in small little circles, and it comes out of Jamaica. Really, no, it's pervasive at that point.
And it's one of the things that Alex Jones talks about. And what I was going to bring up about Jones. Okay, not to keep going back on it, but one of the things that he got shut down on was that Pizzagate or the child pedophilia thing. And I don't know if you guys noticed that, but he came on air and did a retraction because of it. But a lot of things changed once they started talking about the what was going on in New York with John Podesta and Tony Podesta. And you know all this stuff is real because you're seeing all the arrests that are going on right now. But anyone that talks about it, there was another, I know I talked about this guy a couple weeks ago. He was another reporter. I don't remember what his name is right now, but all his stuff on Facebook or on the internet just disappeared after he came out on a pedophilia story. And then who's the latest one that just came out with it? The pedophilia. Dr. Phil.
No, I'm not even aware of it.
Yeah. What, that he's a pedophile, or
no,
exposed
he's been exposing it. And
look, you guys, anyone listening, look up Kathy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, Kathleen Sullivan. The names go on and on. These are people that were in these pedophilia rings. They were subjected to MK Ultra type monarch programming. Some of them acted. They're basically satanic soldiers that woke up and they're out. They all tell the exact same story, and the things are almost impossible to believe. But that's why this is something that involves your spirit and your heart. It's why I always use the example of, how do you prove to someone that I love, my wife? How do you prove I love my wife? Because if I had to do it in a court of law, I'd lose, because a prosecutor could poke enough holes in my life to make it seem like I don't love her. It's something only you can know on the inside. You can't define it. And that is what we're talking about. The truth is very much the same way. It is the most subjective thing in the world, and it's something that at the end of the day your heart knows. Sometimes your heart battles your mind on what is true. And that's why it's one of the reasons that I'm not, if you notice, every time we talk about flat earth, for instance, I'm always like, well, I'm 51-49. If you guys remember, I've used those numbers before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do sort of think it's flat, but we're up against the greatest deceiver in world history. And it would be right out of his playbook to launch something like that, get a lot of people to start saying, yeah, the earth is flat, only to have it be completely disproven and have them discredited. And that method of operation is used a lot. There's a lot of false conspiracy stories that are put in there.
They're simply put out there to be false.
Like martial law, like probably 2 years ago, there was this big, and again, it was almost like it was coordinated, Tony. Everyone's like, they're going to be doing martial law next month. And photographs of martial law signs, trucks taking martial, and it was like martial law was going to come right now. And there were a lot of people on alternative media saying, get prepared for martial law starting this week. And everyone goes running around, gets all scared, and then it doesn't happen. And then the dude loses credibility because he was saying like it's going to.
Right.
And that's why, and it's so hard because when you get started doing what we're doing, and it's another reason that we haven't really started promoting the show even yet, because we have to get better at knowing what's real and what's not, because we get one of those false stories in there, and they will, kind of like they're doing with Alex Jones, that one little tidbit, one little slip, one little crack, they are now using to try to defame the guy. But he's certainly been the target of,
Didn't he and Beck have a tiff too?
Yeah. A little bit. Well, more Beck with him than the other way. But no, you're absolutely right though. That what they do is they find that little thing to discredit you, and it's even like you'll see it on the Trump stuff on Facebook. Oh, they said this was going to happen, and it's been 30 days. It hasn't happened, and they try to use that as, see, you're stupid. You're a tin hat wearing, see, Obama never took your guns. I had people tell me this. Obama's never tried to take your guns. And then I'll go back and I'll say, well, here's this law, here's this law, here's this law. These are all the ways they were going behind the scenes.
They're doing it in degrees. Right. And I've got quotes that talk about how they control society they can't go over. You can't go from I Love Lucy to the Kardashians in one season. It takes 30 years. But with I Love Lucy, they couldn't even have Ricky and Lucy on the same bed. And now, who are our mainstream media stars, they're literally Kim Kardashian's famous because she had, literally, I've seen the tape. She banged a dude, and she's proud of it. Like, could you imagine that? Had that come out for Lucille Ball? So that's how far, but they do it in degrees. It goes from I Love Lucy, then there's the I Dream of Jeannie, now we're getting, and Bewitched, then we get Three's Company, where he's living with girls, and now premarital sex is, cheered on. Yeah. And I was a part of that generation, so...
Well, they're showing gay encounters now.
Yeah, Modern Family is... they've turned they've basically taken God's laws and flipped them upside down in a matter of 60, 70 years, really beginning in about 1913. That's when it began. It took about 100 years to get us to go from a really Christian nation to we were Sodom and Gomorrah completely. I was standing outside having a cigarette. There's a pregnancy assistance clinic right there. Because the society we live in is such that 14, 15, 16-year-old girls that have nowhere else to go are having kids out of wedlock.
That's so they can go get a mammogram.
Well, it's not a Planned Parenthood, so.
Well, whatever it is, it's
even if it were
in the family of plans.
Yeah, no, it's all things that have been talked. We're to the age now. I think we get to the point where you've been around for so many years. You hear the stuff when you're young, and you're like, that's never going to happen. And then year after year, it starts happening, and pretty soon you get to the point, hey, this is exactly the kind of stuff they talked about in 1984, right? All these things on how they're going to do this and how they're going to turn things around. And you can see right now there is a war going on. Whether you admit it or not, there is a war going on. It's a war between good and evil. And if you don't want to go that far, let's say you just go to this media. Okay? There's not a war between good and evil. There's just a war between the media and the people. This is an information war that's going on. Now you're talking about a war on Christianity. And you can argue there is a war going on against Christianity.
I can actually, after doing the research on this book, I can frickin' prove it without a doubt.
Right.
But if you don't believe us, believe Eisenhower, who said in 1950-something that, well, I'll try and pull the quote up here, the forces of good and evil are amassed against each other like never before in history. And I think he would not be surprised by the conversation we're having today. Like a lot of people saw this coming. It's amazing how prophetic some of the comments from insiders through the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s saw that this day would be here, that we'd be falling apart morally.
See, this is what's interesting is you can argue. Some people argue that this is just progression going on, right?
Exactly. Oh, society's evolving. Wrong. Put a D in front of it. We are devolving, people.
Look what's going on with the. Just take the last 8 years, the Obama administration. We won't even go any further than that. But you've got the LGBTQ,
right?
Whatever that.
LMNOP.
Yeah, you've got all this going on. You've got so many different things, and people talk about it's now. We're talking about Trump and going to Syria, dropping bombs, going to the things he's doing. Look how all the Democrats, right, were totally against war, right? Trump is going to take us to war. He's going to do this and that. But then when we went and bombed Syria because of the gas attack, all of the media, liberal media pundits, were all praising him for it. And they're trying. And the funny thing is, they're trying to push us off like it's a Democrat versus Republican. It's not. It's been proven it's not. You've got some of the Republicans and some of the Democrats are all lumped into one group, right? You can't say all of them. It's like the news people. You can't say all.
No, there are. I'm sure there are good Democrats. There's one or two, right?
I don't know. But the point is, they're in on it together, and all these things that are going on is part of an agenda, and it's becoming very apparent. It's becoming out in the open, like we talked about earlier, where things are going to start becoming open to the people's eyes are going to be opened up to what their leaders are doing, right? So all this stuff is happening, and then you have all this stuff combining. I mean, you can talk about financial, you can talk about the war stuff, you can talk about climate, lesbian, gay stuff, the self-driving cars, automation, you name it. You just go right down the list of all these different things, and all this stuff is proceeding on track very quickly. Very scary stuff. And you can say, oh, that's just... No, it's not just happening. It doesn't just happen organically. It's happening...
Right.
It's not like evolution.
We're taught to believe that society is organically and through natural evolution moving into these areas of greater consciousness or better understanding. And yeah, you could make an argument, but it's being guided by a very powerful coterie of little people that frankly happen to be the same ones behind our Federal Reserve banking system and all of the central banks now pretty much of the world. I think there's only a couple holdouts. My mom yesterday was telling me how Chavez in
North Korea and
Venezuela. I tried to tell her, I'm like, Mom, we don't know if Chavez in Venezuela is really a good guy or a bad guy. But I do find it odd that of all the leaders in the world, really, and there's a lot of bad dictators out there, why are you so hell-bent on this guy? Isn't it ironic that has one of 3 nations that still does not have a central bank? Think about it. And where have all of our wars in the last 20 years have been with nations that did not have central banks, but now they do. Eisenhower's quote, by the way, it was at his inaugural address, and I'm guessing that he was referencing communism. There is no doubt that communism is a link in the dark side's plan to ultimately control the world under one government. The whole Cold War was it's such a staged event. It makes my
the whole communist system was put in by the U.S.
and not just put in, it was augmented and financed by the same people that financed the Nazis in World War II. Mm-hmm. And after World War II, the Russians on many occasions were on the verge of total collapse and bankruptcy. And who came in time and again to salvage the bankers, the central bankers that were in the United States? The Rockefellers, the Morgans, and it's unbelievable the amount. In fact, in the 70s, this popped up a little bit in Congress too, where weapons that were made with American money in factories that were made with American money and American plans and American technology were being used by North Vietnamese soldiers that got them from the Russians to kill our American boys in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. See, these people are at the top of the pyramid, and they play both sides against. All wars are just.
Well, it's like the whole Middle East. I mean, you're absolutely right, because you start reading in this is all proven stuff. I mean, you can find the trail of who paid Lenin and these guys. Who,
Yeah, don't expect Megyn Kelly on Fox to be. She won't know anything about this. She just likes to be ushered into restaurants, and she likes to sell books and gets to dress up every day for television. She's not a real journalist.
None of these people are real
None
journalists.
of them are. They're just news readers.
They're news readers, and they're all reporting the same stories. Here's another good example.
Their personalities.
Yeah,
you guys aware of what happened
and they're
in
also
Georgia?
all good looking.
You guys know what's going on in Georgia with the
Russia and Georgia, or Georgia, the state?
The state of Georgia with the special elections they're having.
No.
Well, all the Hollywood folks are getting on board to try to get this Democrat's named John Ossoff.
Okay.
Oh, here's Alyssa Milano's comment here. The Georgia special election made me want to puke because they're all in support of this Democratic candidate who doesn't even live in the district, right? So I asked myself, well, first of all, why would Hollywood care who gets elected in Georgia for what purpose, right? And so you could see that this is all a big, all these news things.
First of all, if you're taking your political commentary from Alyssa Milano, just shoot yourself in the head.
Well, exactly. But all of these people are on they're all commenting on it. They're all behind it. And it's a big thing that they need to do this. And it's all the media is following the same thing. They're following the same path. So this should wake people up. But it's so hard to get people to understand what's going on because they get their news from the same sources all the time. And I even find myself doing it. You watch Fox News or you watch something, and you hear a story, and you say, well, that's...
When I watch Fox, I don't even watch it anymore.
Yeah, I cannot watch that.
And it's not just yelling. Fox or CNN; it's all of it. And here's my advice to all of you guys. And if you think about this logically, why would you want to sit back and have someone else tell you what's important, and then they give you their version of what's important all day? Where right now we have a tool for the first time in history that we can actually go and seek out our own information of what we think is important. Now, they're even starting to F with that a little bit because your Google search will be different than mine.
Oh, the Google search is another big thing. They're proving they've got all these all the software changed so that they can point you where they want to point you.
Yeah.
They can hide things that they want to hide from you. Facebook is doing it.
Something happened this week on YouTube also.
YouTube has been banning people for, Mark Dice and anyone who's...
it's Timothy Alberino, who's a guy, he works for Steve Quayle, and he's a guy that's exposed a lot of these hybrid giants that have been found in the jungles of South America. All of a sudden, he was kicked off of YouTube, and they always make it seem really seedy for illegally posting content that he never, it just sounds nasty. And I will say this on YouTube, the guy, the YouTube user's name is Vengeance from 1979. He hosts The Anatomy of a Great Deception. He's one of those guys that, he's not a bootlegger because I gave him permission to do it, but he's got 2 or 3 million views for our movie on his site alone. And he sent me a message this week asking if I'd noticed an incredible drop in YouTube traffic. And I had. Our YouTube traffic has dropped 90% in the last 10 days.
And why is that?
Because
Good question.
It's these algorithms that they're putting
Very
in.
possibly. I mean, look, the forces we're up against aren't dumb. They know that people are starting to get out into the internet. That's why companies like Amazon, and I do think Jeff Bezos is, you don't start an Amazon. It's not like along the way he decided to join this group. I believe that he was with them from before Amazon was even born. And you're not going to raise $600 million in this world unless the forces of darkness approve it. There is no way, because it's going to have to come through a bank, and every bank is controlled by, it's not going to happen. Smaller amounts maybe, because not everything can be observed and vetted. Same reason Mark Zuckerberg, he had a $50 million investment from the Central Intelligence Agency for Facebook. YouTube has been pretty clean up to now, but for whatever, some algorithm changed because all of a sudden our organic traffic dropped. I mean, unbelievably. Is it break time, Kenny?
Yeah.
All right, why don't we take...
Yeah, let's take 5. We'll continue the conversation when we get back. We're going to get back into our discussion on the media. And, there's so much going on. And I think it's important that we try to figure out what's real, what's not real. And that's pretty much what our job is, I guess, right?
Well, that's funny. What Dave was just talking about, University of Michigan is putting a class out on how to spot fake news. You got the thing from Facebook that's bringing it up. You're hearing all these same thing. You're hearing a bunch of stories about it. Fake news. We're trying to educate the people, and really, that's the propaganda. That's where they're trying to manipulate you into who you listen to.
Right.
And that should be a red flag right there. When someone's trying to take information and say, "Oh, you can't listen to this person or that person," and it hasn't worked. This is a good thing. Getting back to Alex Jones, this is hasn't worked for Alex Jones because Hillary talked about him. All the newscasters have talked about him being fake news, and they brought all this stuff out, and it basically backfired.
Well, yeah, they probably helped him.
It basically did because people they're checking out who is this Alex Jones.
Well, one of the things before we wrap up the Alex Jones topic that I wondered to myself, I said to myself, was what was Alex Jones about to come out with? I think, if he could be a fly on the wall, that he was about to break with something huge. And that's why the smear job happened when it happened.
Well, he's been leading up to the pedophilia stuff.
Okay, right, but I'm saying so maybe it was a pedophilia bomb. But it makes me wonder when I see something like that happen, because I mean basically he's just doing what he's always been doing. So what did he have? What was he about to drop? That got delayed.
This is not the first time though they've tried to describe. I mean, there's been an ongoing.
Yeah, but this one seemed like a full-out press.
There is a full press. That's why I'm saying I can't stress this enough. There is a war going on, and people better start getting ready because it is happening. It is coming. There's no doubt that it is coming. It's starting through the news, and it's spreading to every little. There's going to be Look at what's going on in the news right now. You talk about Antifa.
What's Antifa?
Antifa is the anti-fascist groups that have been attacking all the, Berkeley and anyone that's, you see these stories where, like Ann Coulter.
Oh, they were rioting over her speaking at Cal.
They don't want her speaking. This Milo Yiannopoulos, they stopped.
They hate Milo.
You name it. There's a bunch of different people. All these schools are blocking these people from speaking. And this anti-fascist group, what's ironic is that is doing exactly what they're claiming to be against.
Well, right, they're fascists. They're anti. They call themselves anti-fascism, and what they're preaching is fascism.
Right, and they're trying to justify this, and they've had people talking about how they're talking about violence now, right? They're going to use violence against it. All this stuff has been predicted. Well, I mean, how many months ago were they talking about this whole thing going down with the Civil War and before the elections and everything if Hillary didn't win?
Well, it actually goes back even further. In fact, who was it that said communism is coming to the United States, but it will never come under the name of communism.
Right.
It'll come under, and we do see it because the
difference
difference between.
I think it was Reagan who said it'll come under the.
I'll look it up here.
Liberalism.
I've got it right. It's gonna, and you see it like Bernie Sanders. I mean, yes, technically he's a socialist, but socialism is communism.
Right.
It is. In fact, all the isms really are the same system. Fascism, which is the joining of religion and business, which is really what we're seeing because our religion is what business determines it is because it's what's on the news.
Right.
And there's a common thread that what is literally anti-biblical. Why is it the things that are specifically anti-biblical that are being portrayed, that are changing so drastically in this country, 180 degrees away from what... the school system was invented. You know the reason why we invented the school system?
To learn how to read the Bible.
Yes, to teach people how to read so they could all read the Bible. Because for a long time, the Bible was only really in Latin. You had to go to your priest.
Right, and if the Catholic Church had their way... It would
still be that way. Exactly. And so it's only this is our lifetime. I mean, I was born in 1968. 5 years prior to that, I mean, that's really when I think this country started to fall apart. The Kennedy assassination, 1963 was also the year we literally outlawed a historically verifiable accurate account of history. We outlawed it in our schools. Think about that. We outlawed a particular book. And yet we laugh at Hitler and the Nazis for burning books. Yeah. And back then, homosexuality was so far buried, like it was such a terrible thing that it was buried, lost in society, and it only took a generation or so for it to go 180 degrees to where we are
celebrated.
It's celebrated.
Yeah, right now you are shamed and looked down upon if you're not a homosexual.
Exactly. That we are Sodom and Gomorrah, and Jefferson, I think, said this that he trembles for our. He goes, "I tremble for my country when I consider that God is a just God." And then someone else, as a joke, said, maybe this was Chuck Missler, said that if God doesn't punish the United States, he owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. But that is our nation. I mean, look at who our pop stars are. Look at what we idolize and praise in this country. Look at what the halftime shows of the Super Bowl are, or what the awards shows are for the Oscars, the Golden Globes. That it is literally, these are all demonic rituals there. And what's being glorified is, and don't get me wrong, because there's a part of me, because I grew up in the world we're in now where, banging as many women as you could was, that's a sign of virility. That's like men are supposed to do that. I didn't realize how anti-biblical it was until I started to realize that God doesn't like that. Not because he's boring and doesn't want you to have fun. It's protection against us because there's some shit that happens there that I'm starting to realize that's not good.
Is he frowned upon that?
God?
Is it frowned upon?
Yeah. Is it frowned upon?
So interesting that we're bringing that point up. But right now, look around the world, the whole agenda that's going on is bringing another religion into all these countries.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's bad about the Bible, but yet they're teaching about Islam in the Bible in schools. Okay. Does anyone really understand what this whole thing is? Why? What is the common sense about bringing radical Islam or bringing Islamic refugees, whatever you want to call these?
Well, it's like anything else.
Who can just give me a clear justification of why this is a good idea or a good thing to do?
It's self-disclosure. They're bringing it in so that they can get you used to it. They can explain away because they know from past experience with the Bible you're never going to read it yourself. So they're going to explain away all the legitimate points that people that are against Islam and Islamic rule and Sharia law. They're gonna discredit all that stuff, and they're going to make you believe it's a religion of peace.
Well, and don't.
Okay, who is behind that is the question, because it's happening all across Europe. It's happening in the US.
Who's behind?
Well,
it?
the powers that be. I mean, what's the I always forget the guy's name. What's the 1840 something letter guy? Pike. Albert Pike.
Well, that's what I was just going to bring
what's
up.
It for? Because they're using. Because right now, the only group of people that you can crap on a regular basis are white guys and Christians.
Okay, here's the interesting thing. Okay, I'm trying to lead you guys. I'm not doing a very good job of it, obviously, but Albert Pike wrote the letter. Apparently, whoever wrote the letter. We won't even say it was Albert Pike. There was a letter, and it was years ago.
And it's not just one letter. There's hundreds of, and I can cite tons of them. The abolishment of Christendom has been their goal for hundreds of years,
right.
Specifically Christendom.
So this has all been explained in that information that you've looked up, and we've seen it. We've seen a lot of these people that might be listening don't know anything about it. But this has all been described, and when you bring this stuff up to people, they're thinking, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. But wait a minute. If it were a conspiracy theory, then I couldn't point to Germany, Sweden, all these different countries of all this importance of bringing all these Islamic people into your country. Okay? Then you look at it, why are there refugees? Well, because we went in and started taking out Assad. We took out, Gaddafi in Libya, and now Assad, right? And the other thing in the Albert Pike letters is they're talking about wanting to start World War III with Russia.
Well, they talked about wanting to start World War I, World War II, and World War III. They've 2 out of 3 they've accomplished. But look what's going on in the Middle East right now, and this whole thing about dropping bombs on Syria, who is supported by Russia, and you got China and North Korea. They're actually making all this stuff happen right in front of our eyes. And it was pointed out in these letters, and you can point to people, and people just blindly let that go. It's like this is organically just happening. North Korea's been saber-rattling for how many years? Is anyone really concerned about North Korea? Do you really think North Korea is a threat? No.
China's a much bigger threat.
Yeah, in 1905 was the first time that everyone listening should go look up a document. It's called The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. It was first shown to the public in 1905 in Russia. And then in 1920, 15 years later, it was released somehow in the United States, and a number of newspapers covered this, talking about how it's like a 24-point plan of how how this group of Zionist Jews, now they blamed the Jews for it. I think it is the Protocols of the Learned Elders, period, and they added the of Zion. And there's a lot of anti-Semitism that comes as a result of these protocols. Certainly anti-Semitism that fueled the Nazis in World War II, thinking the Jews are the problem. But here again, Satan is a deceiver, and we're not really dealing with real Jews. We're dealing with the synagogue of Satan, which are Luciferians posing as Jews. Hey, let's do something and get the other guy to get blamed for it. I mean, that's pretty. We do that we did that in our high school sometimes. You could do something to your neighbor, and then you TP someone's house, and you get them to think, your enemy Bill did it. So that now you got them mad at your own enemy. You're playing people. They do this on a societal level, without a doubt. So this document comes out in the 1920s, and from that point, even up through today, in conspiracy circles, the document has been circulated, and there's always this general commentary, very much like the assassination of Alex Jones's credibility, which is, he's fake, he's not real. But at the end of the day, what Alex Jones says, it's all truth. And then even today, one of the only things I hear against the protocols of the learned elders, I keep hearing, it's a stupid conspiracy theory. It's just a bunch of malarkey. But you know what? The proof is in the pudding, because that plan, it's working to a freaking T. In fact, it might have been, who said this? This was one of the quotes. Once the protocols were out, he said, and it might have been our buddy Winrod again, who said, it's fascinating to have the protocols in one hand and have the daily newspaper in my other hand, and to see these things getting fulfilled like a playbook. And it's not an accident that society is accidentally, organically, naturally fulfilling this plan that was put out at least 112 years ago, if not earlier. We're being guided. We're being moved in this direction. And the other thing I want to clarify, because I used to make this mistake.
Just to clarify, the protocols of the elders of Zion?
The protocols of the learned elders of Zion. It's got a few different names, but the protocols is how it's known.
This is what's come up on Wikipedia.
Okay.
So
I'm just curious. What's the first paragraph say? I'm sure it's already discrediting it.
Is an anti-Semitic fabricated text purporting to describe a Jewish plan for global domination.
The forgery
was first published in Russia, 1903.
Okay. 1903 Russia. I thought it was 1905. Okay, excuse me. So forgery. What do you mean forgery? Okay, so the proof is in the pudding. The strategy in that document is what is happening. So how can you say forged by who?
Well, that's a good point. There are so many. You talk about. We were talking.
I love it. In the first pair, I knew you'd see this on Wikipedia. Anti-Semitic forge. So it's right there. It's almost you feel guilty to even look at it.
Oh yeah, you just dismiss it. It's just like.
It's not anti-Semitic.
Who is the one everyone Snopes goes to?
Rents, Snopes. They're the debunkers.
Yeah. You always go through, and I don't care. It really doesn't matter who said what. Okay, you could say, "Oh, Reagan said this," right? And then they'll come back and say, "No, Reagan didn't say that. It was actually said by so and so." The point is, if it's the truth, if it's legitimate and it's got some kind of learned things you can learn from it, it's meaningful. But these people, Snopes, this Wikipedia, they all just cut it down. So, just dismiss it all.
Well, and because when you tell the truth of something, the truth can stand alone, and so you've got to keep people from even hearing it. And the way they do that is to discredit the source, and it's a very lame strategy, if you ask me. I mean, it only works on stupid people, sheeple, whatever. to discredit a source. But, I mean, Adolf Hitler himself said, and he said this in 1930-something, he said that in 100 years, within 100 years, there would be a man that would come up. Basically, he's describing the Antichrist, that this man is going to come up, purify the world. It's going to be a one-world government. And we can all discredit it because Adolf Hitler said it, and Adolf Hitler was a bad guy. But look at the message. I mean, look at just the message stamp. Forget who said it. Pretend Megyn Kelly on Fox said it or whatever, Anderson Cooper. Does that give it more meaning to you? The statement stands alone regardless of who said it. The same way the protocols of the learned elders are, forgery, forged from what? Forgery means that it's a copy of something that really exists somewhere.
Right, so who wrote the original?
Yeah. Someone put a lot of, when I've read that document, have you guys read it, by the way?
I have not.
Okay, you guys need to read it. It made my hair stand up. That is what, as I was reading it, I got sick. Literally, physically felt it. That is a document literally out of the pit of hell. And our society has been following that document in high gear. And we think 100 years, how could a conspiracy last 100 years? Well, Satan's a lot older than 100 years. And he's got a lot of ways to trick humans who have a lifespan of pretty much less than 100 years to be willing participants in a building block towards this end goal. And many of them, they themselves don't even know the end goal. He's going to do the minimum necessary to get your soul, to get your buy-in, to get you to participate in this. And if that means signing a big record contract, that's it. If it means he's got to do something else, like he's got to get you to the point where you're being filmed having sex with minors so that now you have to do it, but it's even against your will, he'll go that far too. He doesn't, I think, necessarily, that's not his, he doesn't care about humanity at all. He is just using us to destroy ourselves. That's his plan, period. Mm-hmm. And he's doing it just a fabulous job because no one's couched in the Bible anymore. We have no, who are we listening? Where do we get our information? 100 years ago, we used to get it from the dinner table with our family. And the organizing principle of every family and of every community was the Bible. The school was also the church. And as long as that information was coming from that book, there's another quote in here, and I forgot who it was from, but it basically said, the man said that anyone that is couched in the Bible can never be fooled by a conspiracy. They'll never get brainwashed into, it. If you're couched in the Bible, you individually, your family, and your nation are like Satan-proof. But we are so far gone from the Bible, so far gone, that if you even bring up the word homosexuality even in a soft way, like I'm not sure if God would approve of that, you are inviting vitriol from people around you because they have been brainwashed by the media to believe that you're the evil one for not accepting.
Right.
Like, read history, pal.
You're the homophobic, xenophobic,
misogynistic.
Yeah, it's very.
Yeah, did you read this list? I mean, this list is awesome. It's like they all got check marks on them. Like, okay, so number 1 is place our agents and helpers everywhere. Okay, so check. Number 2, take control of the media and use it in propaganda for our plans.
Check.
Check. Start fights between different races, classes, and religions. Check. Use bribery, threats, and blackmail to get our way.
Hold that thought for 1 second, because I wanted to clarify something about, because you just mentioned religion, you reminded me of this. Don't go thinking that the dark side's plan is to instill Islam. Okay, that's not the plan. Anything that is anti-Christian, it doesn't matter if it's Muslim, if it's hedonism, whatever it is, if it's anti-Christian, that will get promoted. And this goes to what you were saying, Howard. It's a bad time to be a Christian. I mean,
yeah.
If you're basically, if it's a Christian message, that's
right. Well, they don't want you to become Muslim. They're just using Islam to destroy Christianity. And then when they're done with that, they'll destroy Islam.
Exactly. Like the plans of the Illuminati,
because atheism is what they want. They want to put you in the right frame of mind.
Well, no, they don't even want
Luciferianism.
They want Luciferianism. They don't even want They don't like actually. Albert
Pike's,
that's
right. They don't
Albert
like
Pike's
atheism,
letter
yeah.
said we're going to destroy 3 types of people: Christians, atheists, and the Catholic Church. 3 massive institutions are going to all get destroyed in one fell swoop. And the only way you can really do that I can imagine, is you've got to have something come out of the sky, say that it's God, say that it created humanity, and basically tell everyone on earth through their own prophets. Muhammad will be talking to the Islamites. We might see Jesus himself here, whatever. And they're going to say that, you guys, you all had it a little bit right and a little bit wrong. You're killing yourselves with these stupid wars. This is your true God right here. This is Jesus Christ. This is but it's going to be a false Jesus. But anyway, so you were on point 4.
Okay, so the next one is...
What are you reading?
I'm reading the list.
This is the protocol.
This is the one-page summary of the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Okay, so number 4 is use Freemasonic lodges to attract potential public officials. Check. Appeal to successful people's egos. Check. Appoint puppet leaders who can be controlled by blackmail.
Total check.
Check, check. Replace royal rule with socialist rule, then communism, then despotism.
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 Check.
Okay. Abolish all rights and freedoms except the right of force by us. On its way.
And that's why Americans, if we give up our guns, you are
done.
literally
already have us.
You are in a prison camp within a month.
Yeah, you don't have to use them.
That's our last line of defense.
That's what I consider the line in the sand. That can't happen.
Yep. And sacrifice people, including Jews sometimes when necessary. This is what I like. Eliminate religion, replace it with science and materialism. This is 1903.
Thank you.
Okay,
now, that's when it went public. It wasn't written in
okay,
1903.
Whether it's fake or not, someone cooked this up in the late 1800s, okay?
Right, and
Control
evolution had just been introduced back
Control the education system to spread deception and destroy intellect.
And the J.P. Morgan interest took over our education system, and they basically teach us lies. Check.
Rewrite history to our benefit.
Check.
Check. Create entertaining distractions.
Check.
Corrupt minds with filth and perversion. Check. Encourage people to spy on one another.
Very Gestapo-like.
Keep the masses in poverty and perpetual
that one's
labor.
Not a check yet.
But that's what is going on.
Now, the Bible predicted that. I mean, they said that even parents would turn in their children and children would turn in their parents.
Yep.
And if you go look at, because the Nazis were a test run for a world plan. And this was one of the things that the Gestapo pulled off. They were much smaller than people realized. But it's kind of like everyone is given a gun to everyone else's head. And if you don't fire first, they might fire on you first.
Right.
So you had people turning in their neighbors
unnecessarily
so that they wouldn't turn.
Right.
And the amount of distrust that was sown was unbelievable. I don't see that one happening heavily today, but it's primed. That's
well, yeah. I mean, at the right moment, it's ready to happen. They just haven't instituted it fully yet.
Well, look at this. Think of it this way. Right now, you've got terrorism is a big thing, right? So they're saying,
yeah. Oh, it is starting to happen.
It is happening.
It's light, but I wouldn't put that one. That one's not in full. I wouldn't put a check mark on that.
No, that's partially checked. Keep the masses in poverty and perpetual labor.
Total check.
Total check.
Not only that, but a few years later, they got women out of the house, and they got them now working too, so they doubled their tax income. And now who's left to raise the children? The education system they put on in point number 6.
Yep. Take possession of all wealth, property, and especially gold.
There's something about gold, and it's more... Man, there's something about gold. I don't know what it is, but one of the things they did in 9/11 was emptied the coffers of the Federal Reserve. There actually is no gold in the Federal Reserve, and there's no gold at Fort Knox either. I don't know if you guys are aware of that.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
All right.
Apparently, wasn't there gold underneath Building 7?
Well, there was gold underneath the whole area. That's where the Federal Reserve banks were, where exactly it was. But this wasn't in my movie, but there were a number of trucks. The things they do in real life, they make fun of in movies. The same way that the minute, in the early 70s, you can find movies about fake moon landings. Go see Die Hard, I think it's 3, the one with Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, that's where
they're literally taking
the gold out from
dump trucks out of the Federal Reserve, and they actually did that on 9/11.
Yeah,
and a lot of guys witnessed this who are now dead.
But so use gold to manipulate the markets, cause depressions, etc.
Done. They would cause the biggest depression in world history 24 years later. 26 years later.
Introduce a progressive tax on wealth.
A progressive tax.
A progressive tax. I think they're talking about the system we have now, where the more money you make, the more you get taxed.
I don't know if that one's a full check yet, but that's another, I think, a half checker.
Replace sound investment with speculation.
Oh my God! When you think of how much, you guys understand what derivatives are, and what fractional banking is?
Barely.
I'm still trying to find out where Howard's reading this from.
So, the actual amount of currency in the United States is, I don't know what that number is, but let's say it's 10 trillion.
Stormfront.org is a site I have up.
So one of the reasons this system, you can view it as being built on a house of cards. What were you going to say, Tony?
I was just going to say, our conversation outside, your Google search, everything that I've looked through here was about how that's a hoax.
What's a hoax? The protocols?
Yeah. When I looked at the protocols and he's reading these off, I'm going through page after page and this is a hoax because of this and that. And
well, that's because you empty your cookies out. So what happens, and this is one of the ways they trick you into feeling it's.
I paged through several forgery hoaxes.
Well, that's what we were talking about. The presenter at TED Talks had shown a good example of how he's a conspiracy theorist. So when he does a search for protocols of Zion, the stuff that he wants to see pops up. But if he tells his friend, hey, go look up protocols, all his friend is going to pull up is what you're pulling up, Tony, which is they're BS, they're fake, they're.
Right.
So they're getting two different results for the exact same information search. And it's really it's like an individual media campaign. And you've got to get around that. That's getting harder and harder.
So I got 2 points left and then a paragraph, and then we can go back to. Okay, so last 2 points. Make long-term interest-bearing loans to governments. Check. Give bad advice to governments and everyone else.
Check.
And then I think this last paragraph is pretty interesting. It says, eventually the Goyim, which is us, any non-Jew, for those of you who do not know what a Goyim is, eventually the Goyim will be so angry with their governments, because we'll blame them for the resulting mess, that they'll gladly have us take over. We will then appoint a descendant of David to be king of the world, and the remaining Goyim will bow down and sing his praises. Everyone will live in peace and obedient order under his glorious rule.
And that's King David, because the prophecy in the Bible is that a descendant of King David would rule.
And technically, isn't Christ a descendant of David?
Yes, because it comes through Mary, through his mother, they're in the same genealogy, but off to the side, I'll guess. The fractional reserve banking, though, that's where the Federal Reserve puts some money into circulation, and let's say the money goes into XYZ bank. Okay, let's just use $1 million. Gets deposited at that bank. That bank only needs to keep 10% of it on hand. That's the fraction. They only need to keep a fraction in reserve, hence fractional reserve. So that bank, the law used to at least be, I believe it still is, they only need to keep 100,000 on their books. Okay, like 100,000 in their vaults. Now that other 900,000, what do? They loan that to other banks. So bank DEF gets a $900,000 loan. They only need to keep 100,000 on their books.
90, actually.
Thank you. 90,000. Thank you. Exactly right. They then loan that out, and that process goes on and on and on. So what you really have is, quote unquote, fiat money in circulation. Off of that is going to be, just off of two banks, we've now got 1.9 million in circulation, but there's only $190,000 actually in a vault somewhere.
Yeah.
And all they need to do is cause a run on cash where people, it's what happened in 1929. Everyone wants to go to the bank to get their money, but there's not enough money there because the whole system it's built on, what's the word I'm looking for? It's derivative. You take that process out to 100 banks, and you now have an extra 100 million now in circulation, but you've got less than 10% of it in reserve. And should that money ever get called, the system will collapse.
Right.
And we do it also with stocks, derivative investing. You've got stock funds that don't even invest directly anymore into like an IBM or a Microsoft. They'll invest in funds that invest in funds that invest in the overall performance of a sector. So what we have in this country, and I don't know what the exact number is, but let's just say there's 10 trillion in actual circulation that left the Federal Reserve, which is a privately owned company by private individuals, most of them of Eastern European bloodline. And they're Jews outwardly, but they're the synagogue of Satan. And what you've got is a system where we used to have this gold standard, and this is why this was so important. And it took about 100 years to get us completely off of it. And Nixon did the final piece, which was completely getting us off the gold standard. So now there's nothing backed up by your paper money. The minute the banks collapse is worthless. Worthless. It means you can't even, you could wipe your butt with it, but you can't eat it. There's no calories in it. It literally will have no value. And right now the problem that the globe faces is there is 900 or so trillion in derivative investments. And all of those investments are tied to 10 trillion of equity. So it's so underfunded. And this is what I think Bernie Madoff was talking about when he said, "You think I'm the problem? I am nothing." Bernie Madoff's the guy that got in trouble for basically faking his stock performance. And I think he's a guy that they punished on purpose. I don't think that was just the media doing its job. He did something along the way, and they made an example out of the guy. Because the whole system is based on it's a fantasy. So everyone that's got a 401k, and I've got a lot of friends, they look at their 401k and it's all, I go, it only has value if you pull that money out right now and convert it into something that you can live off of. Because is coming a day of reckoning, and it's coming sooner than anyone can realize, where all of those investments, essentially, what is the percentage of 10 trillion to 900 trillion? It's almost 100 to 1. 100 to 1. So if your 401k has, let's say, $100,000 in it, you really are only going to have really 10,000 worth of equity when that day of reckoning comes, and there will be no warning. It was something that will be happening overnight. And imagine the psychological devastation. Like if any of you have ever written a paper for school or anything like that, and you accidentally deleted it, you feel how much loss you have just over 8 hours worth of work. Imagine the psychology of the way these people, the way they're going to be thinking about this is, I just lost a lifetime's worth of work. Go listen to what some of the Enron folks said. I mean, Enron is a perfect example of what our entire system is. It is based on fantasy and literally hearsay. And I've got buddies that are economists, that are investment bankers. They know this, but they don't know how to avert it. They don't know how to get around this fact. So get ready for that day. If if you're counting on your little nest egg to make yourself a good old retirement, start getting out of that mindset now, because it'll be way less devastating when it actually happens. I mean, does anyone doubt that's going to happen in our lifetime?
I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime. I don't doubt it's going to happen.
Literally, it could happen at any time. But right now, you see a lot of this going on that, especially if the banking, where this was leading to, okay, it was leading to exactly that. Because to get under one world government, to get under one world currency, et cetera, you have to have...
You've got to destroy the system in place.
Right.
And, oh my gosh, a new system where I get credits and it's on a chip that you insert in my arm? And if I do this, you're going to put $50,000 worth of credits in there right off the bat? Yeah, I'll do it. It's either that or get my head chopped off, right? That's the other alternative. Right. Well, that's a tough decision. Unless you're couched in the Bible, then you know it's coming. But I can't. There are even people couched in the Bible that won't make that are going to take the mark of the beast. And this mark will somehow... What's scary is, in the 40s and 50s, yes, Israel had now been established. Everyone's seeing all of the final pieces coming into place for the last days. But they still didn't know how a system could evolve that would keep you from buying or selling. But that technology exists today. You can't get into some buildings unless you scan something. And sometimes that thing is on your body. It's a thumbprint, or it's an iPad, or your retina, or certainly it can be a little chip that's in you. Mm-hmm. And you won't even be able to... Now I absolutely see we're only a step or two away from a system where you really can't buy or sell unless you have this thing in your hand. And a little propaganda behind the scenes. Anyone that doesn't have that chip, you do not sell to them. All you other citizens, if you know a merchant that is selling to someone that doesn't, then they get the people to turn against themselves.
You think people think that can't happen? There's people out there say, oh, that won't happen. That can't happen.
Well, it's right now they're in the voluntary stage where people are doing it voluntarily. That's the first wave.
The thing that I'm going to bring up right now is talking about health care. Because right now, you can't get health care if you're not in the system. Right? They won't let you go to Blue Cross and say, hey, here's my money. I want to buy health care. No. You go sign up here under the ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. You sign up there. And you sign here that the IRS has rights to all this different things. That's a stage that has already happened.
It's happening also in mortgages. I've seen videos of guys that come in with cash to the bank to make a mortgage payment.
Can't do it.
They don't let them do it because these guys refuse to have an account at a bank. And one particular example, they ended up seizing his home even though he had the funds to pay for it. They just wouldn't accept. And this is how it will happen.
Yeah, if you think it can't happen, it's already happening.
Right. The MO of this group, they don't hit you with, if you think you're in the white section, they don't hit you with the black section. They start by going a little off-white, then maybe cream, then eggshell, and then before you know it, you're in the light grays, and then you're in the charcoal, and then it's not hard to go from charcoal gray to black. That's just one more degree. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing has been 180 degrees from where you started, and that will be. This is my faith in the Bible. I mean, I can see it happening in the news every day. The Bible said it would happen. It will happen. There's going to be something that we take on our hands or on our forehead.
That was one of the Facebook things that we sent and Kat snoped us on. Remember that?
Yeah.
because they had people that were, I think it was Australia. They were saying Australia was the first to come out with this hand tracker like that, where you can buy and sell all from putting it in your hand.
I saw a news piece about it a week ago.
Oh, I've seen many news pieces about it.
You won't even need credit cards anymore. You just
this is, and I'm saying this is disclosure, right? This is how they're disclosing. This is how they're getting people on board. They had a news story, and I think we talked about this already, about the lady who just out of the blue was complaining that all her friends didn't agree with her chipping her kids or something like that, or vice versa. Do you remember that story?
No, I'm not sure.
It was a story where someone came out and she couldn't believe that other parents wouldn't chip their kids because it's a responsible thing to do. And it was this big news story. They're spreading it around.
Oh, they're going to play on your heartstrings. One of the directors, and I want to say it was Google, it was a female. She's giving a presentation, and here's how she pitched it. She's like, we now have the technology where we can put whatever information you want on a little chip. And she goes, parents, you think about this. If you put that chip into your children, and let's say something happens to them and they go to the hospital and you're not there. Well, guess what? Immediately, their whole history, their blood type, things that they're allergic to, through a very quick scan, the doctors will have that information. And everyone in the crowd is clapping like, "Oh, how wonderful, how wonderful." Right. They're setting us up slowly to the point where because Satan doesn't come at you with pitchforks and red faces and horns and shouting things. Dude, he comes at you as a beautiful woman or a beautiful man, a good thing, something fun, something. That's how he's awesome salesman like that. And you're going to appear psycho if you don't agree that you should do this for your own kids and family.
Absolutely. Well, it's like with
the name of the woman you're talking about is Stephanie Rodriguez Neely.
That sounds...
And her comment was, every parent's nightmare when you can't find your child. If it'll save my child, there's no stuff that's too extreme, says Rodriguez Neely. Microchipping would be an extra layer of protection if something bad does happen.
Yeah, you can find, I'm not sure if that's her, but it could, but either way, you'll find thousands, and that's coming, and it's coming. Whenever you see it on the news, it will always be promoting, like it's already been promoted to me as a CEO, more in the fact of have your employees carry a badge around that they can scan, otherwise they can't get into a certain area. It's not far to go from a badge hanging around your neck to shit, why don't we just tattoo it on your arm? Right. Make this even, why carry around this thing? Like we're so close to all these things that were predicted biblically.
But here's in order to make that happen, you have to follow this agenda and get people away from the Bible.
You got to get them away from that first.
You got to get them away from the Bible and get that out of their mindset that is the mark of the beast. That's what's going on. That's what people don't realize.
Right. They're not going to be stores called Mark of the Beast stores.
Yeah. I'm looking to get one of those Mark of the Beast things.
Yeah. It's going to be more like Good Citizen store. And that's how they're going to play this when it's going to ramp up. Personally, I believe that financial system will be installed after the Third World War. And Einstein said it really well. He said, I'm not exactly sure what weapons will be used in the Third World War, but I do know that in the Fourth World War, it will be sticks and stones. Mm-hmm. And that's part of their plan is and the Bible clearly talks about it. There's something coming on the earth, which is, it's going to be worse than anything that has ever been on the earth. And I think it's going to be some combination of my personal theory, fantasy, is someone launches a nuke at someone else. All of a sudden, the aliens show up and intervene. Then some other aliens show up to say, no, we don't intervene. And then we get drawn into literally an intergalactic war. And there's total freaking devastation everywhere. And out of the ashes rises some dude who is the Antichrist, who, I think they'll tell us he's half alien, half human, because Jesus was half God half spirit, half man. Satan's a counterfeiter. The Antichrist, I believe, will be half man, half spirit, his spirit. Of course, they'll tell us it's aliens, not.
Actually, Christ was fully human and fully God.
Well, you understand what I mean. His origins came from... He was one of the most unbelievable living creatures that's ever existed. And I do believe the biblical story of his origination. The Antichrist will have essentially an identical story,
right,
but they're going to be tapping into the spirit of Satan, not the spirit of God. And the dude knows how to speak. He knows how to sway crowds. I mean, if you thought Hitler was good, you have seen nothing. This guy's going to be loved by everybody because he's going to save the world. He's going to stop this intergalactic war, and it's going to usher in this new world order. And this is what the only way I can see the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews and all these warring factions coming together is if some provable higher authority appears, which most people think is God, and basically says, you guys are wrong. We're doing this right starting now. You all know that Jesus Christ was going to have 1,000-year reign on earth. It's starting right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the big deception is that's the Antichrist. He will be in power for 7 years, and then the real Jesus will show up. So the first time you see Jesus in the sky, people, do not believe it. Wait 7 years, then you'll see the real one, and he won't miss a date.
Okay. Parting thoughts?
I was just going to bring up this. You talked about something that's going to happen. This is a whole thing of order out of chaos, right?
Yeah. Order ab cow. It's been their logo, their slogan for years.
Did you see the new Bill Gates bio attack could kill millions, warns Bill Gates? That just came out in the news just
the guys that are in control of this earth, Satan is the god of this earth. He is right now. He's got a temporary lease on this planet, and he knows it's running out soon. His strategy will be order out of chaos, and that is echoed through all of the secret societies. You can see that phrase in a ton of movies. They're out about it.
It's one of those regurgitated lines.
And so at the end of the day, folks, don't let this stuff scare you, because if you are with Jesus Christ and you believe he was the Son of God and that he died for us to give us a way out of this prison planet, this stuff cannot harm you in the long run. It might cause some discomfort, big deal. We talk about this so that you get to the truth of who Jesus Christ was. There is no more person that is more important for anyone to know intimately than who the identity of that man was. Or God, whatever you want to say. But he is coming back. And soon.
And with
That's all I got.
we will be back next week.